Hello, everybody, and welcome to Christmas Clatter here on YouTube. A quick introduction before we roll with this episode. First of a new episode I have called Christmas Clatter Cares. When Christmas Clatter first started, May of 2019, I've ended every episode of the podcast saying, Keep Christmas hope alive. And I hope through talking Christmas year round and bringing some joy and laughter to you guys that I've done that. But I feel like I need to stretch a little bit more in order to keep Christmas hope truly alive. Do some things that are real more meaningful. Well, not that joy and laughter isn't meaningful, but things that can make a difference in other people's lives and in helping and being that good neighbor, even when it's not Christmas time. And so Christmas in July, I had these plans of doing things, but due to things that have come up and not under my control, I had to pivot a little bit. It wasn't going to come together like I had hoped. So I pivoted and I came up with something that I think's a little bit better, and that's just called Christmas Clatter Cares. It's a new episode series that I hope to run about once a quarter or so, um, to see how things go and how you guys respond to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on charities and nonprofits. And I'll try to tie Christmas into each episode, but if basically the episode is, for the spirit of giving for Christmas. So if we don't talk lots of Christmas, just be patient with me because we are just trying to highlight some needs and trying to connect people with others that maybe have the means to help or feel led to volunteer, that kind of thing. So if we don't go all in with the Christmas talk, it is Christmas talk because it's about giving and about helping and it's about charity. So, welcome to Christmas Clatter Cares. This is the first episode. I'll just throw it in with all my other episodes. I'm not going to read number or anything, but I have Jeff Deskovic in the Jeff Deskovic Foundation. A tragic story with a 180 turnaround. It's crazy. I wish I had a little bit more time with Jeff, but he's agreed to come back on and some other time in the future. And if Jeff's story and Jeff's mission connects with you, all the links to be able to support him and to be involved will be in the description in the show notes. And I hope you guys enjoy. So we'll run the intro and then it'll be with me and Jeff. Well, joining me here on Christmas Clatter in our new segment of the podcast, Christmas Clatter Cares, in which we highlight a nonprofit, a charity, is Jeff Deskovic. And we got to talking online first, and he told me he needed to tell me about Christmas in prison, which was the few words that really got me hooked about what he had to say. And then he shared his story with me, and it was absolutely amazing. And he's up to some great work. But before we get all of that stuff, Jeff, thanks so much for joining me here on Christmas Clatter.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So when we first started talking, you said something about how about Christmas in prison, and that piqued my interest right away because it's something I think people kind of forget about. When people make certain choices in life or things happen to them, that they go off to prison, to jail, and then Christmas still rolls around. So you unfortunately has spent 16 years there. What was Christmases like when?
Yeah, so it was kind of bizarre in some ways. So you feel a little bit of a sentimental thing because it's Christmas, but then that only goes but so far because you're in prison. So you're not going to be spending time with friends and family unless they decide to make the long trek to visit you on Christmas.
Right.
Good luck on that one.
Right.
But definitely some memories here associated with Christmas that I definitely would love to share with with you and your audience. So I remember there was the Christmas meal. They had stuffing, and which I looked forward to. But the stuffing, it was just a thought because when I actually it was too salty.
Right,
The
right.
potatoes were this awful instant potatoes. The piece of turkey was not real. It was a piece of processed turkey,
Oh
you know.
man.
And yeah, and I had a little bit of gravy that tasted more like it was a brown gravy, not really meant for not really meant for turkey,
Yeah.
even even of the processed variety. So it was you got your hopes up to only to inevitably get disappointed.
Yes.
I will say they did give a piece of real pie that was big. That was
Oh.
usually a pumpkin pie, and I love
Oh
biting
wow.
that crust. So that part
Yes.
of it was good. So go out to recreation. Everybody has the same thought in mind. They all want to use the phone. And imagine maybe 150 or 300 people that want to use the phone, and there are 40 phones.
Oh
So
man.
so after a while, I didn't even, and a lot of guys were inconsiderate.
Hmm.
They would be on there for like 20 minutes. Their call would hang up, and then they would call that person back or call someone else and
Hmm.
do another 20 minutes and possibly repeat that twice. And then, they would pass the phone off to somebody they were cool with. So
Hmm.
if you're standing on the outside of the line waiting to get a phone, if you're not cool with someone that's already in the booth, that's going to be, so you could be waiting, kill your whole recreational period for nothing, just waiting around for a bus that didn't happen. So after a while, I just stopped trying to use the phone on
Yeah.
Christmas. Same rule would apply Easter and Thanksgiving and other holidays. One thing I will say I appreciated from from the volunteers and also from some of the COs as well. So they would walk around. So in prison parlance, the word flats means the bottom floor. So they would
Mhm.
walk around in the flats, and they'd have like a cabal of 3 to 4 people, and a few people would play horns, and then they would start singing Christmas carols. So I liked that. I mean, that took my mind. I went on a mental journey back to when I was a kid, and went to the town gazebo, and I was singing Christmas carols. My mother pleasantly surprised me and showed up. So that triggered that memory. But the water turned on. But you can't let anyone know the water turns on.
Yes.
You know, and the thing also was that while some people, such as myself, silently appreciated them taking their time to do that. Nonetheless, the overwhelming majority of prisoners did not, in fact, like them singing the Christmas carols. And so they would start shouting expletives out of their cell and dropping F bombs and, other choice things. I'll let everybody's imagination run
Yeah.
wild on that. Yeah, so, but overall, I mean, the days leading up to Christmas and Christmas itself, and even that run between Christmas and New Year's, it was a time. It was a time of great stress, because I mean, the fact that you were like locked up in prison was just amplified by so many things. And when you're under a great deal of stress, the small things start to seem bigger. So the everyday common frustrations in prison were amplified, and it was enough to set people off fairly quickly. So you did want to kind of tiptoe around and limit your interactions with people. It's not really a time to joke around either. You don't want someone to take something the wrong way, and before you know it, a fist fight and could be taking using shanks and weapons and everything else could be taking place. Maybe the last thing I'll mention real quick, then I'll yield
Uh-huh.
back the floor. So
You're fine.
there was a correction officer in Elmira, right? And his last name was Summers, and Summers had white hair, and he had a full, from sideburn to sideburn, white thick beard, and he was known. Everybody referred to him informally, not to his face, but I'm sure he knew he was being called this by everybody. Everybody called him Santa.
Uh-huh.
We all called him Santa, and Santa was always handing out coal. That was a very dangerous CO that you wanted to stay way the heck away from. And if he happened to be working, his post was in an area where you had to be. The best thing to do would be to try to avoid coming to Santa's attention. Just try to blend in with the rest of the herd.
Yes.
There
Wow.
was nothing There was nothing jolly about that man.
Yeah. Oh man. Like the anti Santa then. But Wow. When we first scheduled this to meet up and record this episode, one of the first things that came to mind, I, um, I grew up here in Southeast Missouri, just kind of along the Bible Belt, always going to church and I held a lot of those teachings true in a practical sense. And one of the things that really stuck with me, and no matter what your religious beliefs are, and there's a lot tied to the holidays, but no matter what they are, there's a few things that are just good ideas to do. And one of them was a teaching that Jesus had where he said, when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. And when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat, which is something we should be doing for those that are in need, no matter who they are. And that's what he was saying. He's like, basically if you help those in need, then you're helping God, basically was the point. And one of those things was, when hungry, thirsty, needed clothes, and one of those is when I was in jail, you visited me, you
Right.
know, and that was one of the things that kind of kept rolling back in my mind. It's like we, I don't, I know a few people that are in jail or in prison, and it's like they go and then they're forgotten, unless they're close family, and I know it's a difficult ask to get in there to visit, but I just want to encourage anybody that's listening, if you have a loved one that's in that situation for whatever reason, just a simple visit any time of the year, but especially around the holidays, would probably do their heart and their mind wonders. Just to have a friendly and loving face there to see, in person. And but let's talk about your story a little bit, because you talked about, you spent some time in prison, and you have all these recollections of the holidays and how stressful they were, but you weren't there because you really did anything. You just
Right.
kind of got accused of it and prosecuted for it. Go ahead, and I'll give the floor to you to tell your story, because it is one amazing story and some great work has come from it. So Jeff, just let us know what happened and walk us through it.
Sure. So I got falsely accused of a murder and rape, which I did not commit. I was 16 years old, and ultimately I was wrongfully convicted of it. And I served 16 years in prison prior to being proven innocent through DNA testing. So let me walk everybody through. So the wrongful conviction was caused by coerced false confession, prosecutorial misconduct, and fraud by the medical examiner, terrible public defender. So, in terms of the coerced false confession, I mean, false confessions have actually been the cause of wrongful conviction in 25% of the DNA proven wrongful convictions. So, the year was 1990. The place was Peekskill, New York, in Westchester County. It was think middle class, think ethnically diverse. So, I didn't think of it this way then, but in many ways, I kind of lived a double life. So after school in the apartment complex where I grew up in, there were a lot of kids there, and in the nearby neighborhoods, and they used to come to the playground, and we would play all sorts of games, and I would be kind of like one of the main kids, and whatever I suggested that we do would usually be what we would do, whether that would be basketball or ride on bikes or go play video games or do, play Monopoly or other kind. We played tag, and ironically, jailbreak was a game that was played, not knowing what the significance of that would be in the future. But that was after school. But in school, in high school, I was actually a little bit younger than the other kids because I had skipped a grade at a very early age. And actually, that would catch up to me and be a factor because I really wasn't into drinking beer and parties and chasing girls. And so that's what the kids in high school were about. And so I was really kind of on the fringes of the society. So I was kind of quiet and to myself, and I didn't participate in a lot of organized sports, and that made me seem strange to the kids in the high school. So, in the course of the police investigation, they interviewed a lot of students from the school, and some of them told the police that they might want to speak to me because I didn't quite fit in.
Mhm.
So that's what put me on the police radar initially. Another factor was I was a sensitive teenager. I had emotional reaction to a victim who was a classmate in two of my classes, a freshman, one is a sophomore. I knew her name, she knew mine. That was really the extent of it. We were not even really on a high by basis. But it did strike me, and the police looked at that as being suspicious. Like, you're having this disproportionately emotional reaction to
Mhm.
almost a stranger.
Right.
Although in a bigger context, I mean, this really shook up a lot of people in the city to the point that free mental health services were offered to anyone who wanted it. So in that aspect, I don't think I was all that different from other people.
Yeah, you weren't. I've had that happen to me before, even as an adult. Someone passes that I barely know, and it's like for some reason it just hits you stronger than others. So it's just one
Right.
of those things. Yeah.
Right. And then they got a psychological profile from the NYPD, which purported to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator. And I had the misfortune of matching those characteristics. So you might say it was type of reinforcing factor.
Hmm.
So a couple of things about my background, which are going to help you understand the interaction between me and the police. So firstly, I came from a single parent household. My dad was never involved in my life in any aspect. So that intersected with the good cop, bad cop technique, where one officer pretends to be a friend, is like a father figure, and the other one's more aggressive. So I began to look up to the officer who was pretending to be the friend as a father figure.
Hmm.
Another thing is that prior to my teenage years, the career that I fantasized about having when I grew up was to actually be a cop. So in my 6 weeks of interaction with the police, the interaction took on the following dynamic: that half the time they would speak to me like I was a suspect. And when they would push too hard and I would become frightened, I'd want to get away from them, then they would switch it up. And Jeff is this junior detective helper theme was pushed by them. And so so that's the connection between wanting to be a cop and what happened. So they would say things like, the kids won't talk freely around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They'd ask me opinion questions and congratulate me that my opinion was correct.
Hmm.
So eventually they got me to agree to take a lie detector test. So the next day, rather than report to the school, I went to the police station. My mother and grandmother thought I was in school, so they didn't call around looking for me. They drove me across county lines from Peekskill, which is in Westchester County, to the town of Brewster, which is in Putnam County. So 40 minutes away by car, which meant that I was not able to leave on my own anymore. I was totally dependent on the police. There was three officers that came with me from Peekskill. Of course, they put me in the car with the good cop by myself. And then the Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, the polygraphist, Daniel Stevens, he was dressed like a civilian and he was pretending not to be a cop. So he never identified himself as law enforcement. He never read me my rights. He gave me a 4-page brochure which explained how the polygraph worked, but then it had a lot of big words in it that I didn't understand. But I figured, well, I'm here to help the police. So what does it matter?
You're right.
Let's just get on with it.
Hmm.
I didn't have any attorney present either, and I wasn't given anything to eat. So from there, he put me in a small room and gave me countless cups of coffee. Seems pretty clear the purpose of that was to get me nervous.
Right.
Then he attached me to the polygraph machine, and then he launched into his third degree tactic. So he invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours.
Holy cow! Wow.
Towards the end of that, he said, "What do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test results that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it." Then at that moment, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and told me that the other officers were going to harm me. He had been holding them off but couldn't do so any longer, that I had to help myself. And he added that if I did what they wanted and I told them what they wanted to hear, they'd stop what they're doing, that I could go home afterwards. So being young, naive, that I wasn't going to be arrested. So being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, not thinking about the long term, just being concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life. The fact that I didn't know where I was and no one else knew where I was either loomed quite large in my mind. I was overwhelmed emotionally and psychologically. And, then on one hand, there's this threat and then there's this false promise. So I made up a story based on the information they had given me in the course of that interrogation in the 6 weeks run up to it. By the time it was all said and done, I collapsed into to the floor into a fetal position, crying uncontrollably.
Mhm.
And I obviously was, in fact, charged with murder and rape.
Oh Well, that's a lot to take in. I mean, that's such a high pressure situation, and I'm nearly 44 now, and it's like, just to think back when I was 16, it's like I would be the same way. I would just wilt under the pressure, and that's everybody talks about, like, those payday lenders being sharks and stuff, but they were using kind of like the same kind of tactics, to get, it's like they knew what the answers were, but they didn't know how to show their work to get there. So they just kind of bullied their way, because they thought they had the right answer,
Right.
and you know, all I can say to that is, as a citizen, is like, I apologize for that, because our police, there's so many good people and great people in our police department that, I'm sorry that had to happen to you.
No, I appreciate your sentiment. No, it does. It is healing, and it does mean a lot. So continuing on with the story for a sec. Um, so before I went to trial, a DNA test came in from the FBI lab, and it showed the semen and the victim didn't match me. But rather than acknowledge they made a mistake, they continued to prosecute full speed ahead. The prosecutor got the medical examiner to commit fraud. When the DNA didn't match me, he suddenly claimed that he remembered that he forgot to document medical evidence that he said showed that the victim had been sexually active, that she'd been promiscuous, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue that it didn't matter that the DNA didn't match me. That didn't mean that I was innocent. There was yet another person that she must have slept with before I murdered and raped her. Taking it a step further, he mentioned another youth by name that he claimed that she had slept with, but he never set the proper foundation. So he never had a DNA test performed. He never called him as a witness. He just made the unsupported argument to the jury. So a couple things here to understand. So firstly, the victim's family was not coming to court, so they had no idea of what was being said about her in the courtroom. In order to wrongfully convict me, they were willing to trash her reputation.
Oh my.
And another thing is, my public defender essentially didn't defend me. He never called my alibi as a witness. He never tried to discredit this medical examiner. He never explained to the jury the significance of the DNA not matching me. He never used the DNA test to challenge the confession. He would not allow me to take the stand to explain what happened in the interrogation room. Sometimes he was arguing the confession never happened. Other times he argued that it happened, but it was coerced, and at still other times he was arguing that it happened, but it was false. So you can't sit there and tell three stories without everybody like disbelieving you on everything.
Yes. I have four kids. I know that tactic very well.
Right. So added add it all up. And then also, the judge allowed this polygraphist to keep telling the jury that I failed the polygraph, which, was against the law for the polygraph to even be into evidence, but he allowed him to keep telling the jury anyway that I failed, and added it all up. I was wrongfully convicted of murder and rape, and I was given a 15 to life sentence, which the judge imposed despite saying to me at the sentencing, maybe you are innocent, when I referenced the DNA. But he took the easy way out, and he sent me a 15 to life sentence, and I was sent to a men's maximum security prison as a 17-year-old with a 15 to life sentence.
Oh man. Maybe you're innocent. That's got to be a dagger. I mean, I'm not a lawyer and I don't pretend to be, but I love history and what concepts are, and it's like, the concept of beyond a reasonable doubt is not you may be innocent, and that doesn't seem to line up. And
right.
But I just
there's a Christmas crossover in my conviction, though, that it just dawned on me to mention. Yeah, it's not good either, but it is true, so I'm going to share it. Okay. So the trial happened in late December, and I remember the jury sent out a note asking the judge, well, if we can't come up with the unanimous, because the verdict has to be unanimous, 12 people have to agree one way or the other. So they sent out a note, and they said, well, if we can't come up with a verdict, are we going to be sequestered over the Christmas holiday?
Ooh.
And the judge said yes. And so I learned many years later, after I was exonerated, this juror contacted my civil rights lawyer, and he said, "Yeah, I saw the news. Jeff is out. He's exonerated. I'm glad that that happened. That he's home because I never thought he was guilty to begin with."
Oh,
And so my
goodness.
lawyer asked the obvious question: "Well, if you didn't think he was guilty, why did you vote that way then?" And he said, "Well, at the time, it was 11-1 for a conviction. I was the holdout juror. They were pressuring me. And then when we sent out that note and the judge stated that we would, in fact, be sequestered over the Christmas holiday, and none of us wanted to do that, including me, that was why I switched my vote from not guilty to guilty."
Oh my goodness. See, if I was that juror, that would haunt me every Christmas. That would just haunt me every Christmas when Christmas rolled around. It'd be like, wonder where Jeff's doing now. And, you know,
Yeah, right.
yeah. Well, that's probably why he reached out to your attorney later on. Is probably because it did haunt him, you know, and things. But let's fast forward 16 years in prison. We talked about your holidays there in prison and how, very, very lightly they were rough, but go ahead, sir.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, you had to. So I mean, the food in general was terrible.
Uh-huh.
Right. Sometimes it wasn't fully cooked. At other times it was burned. Portion control problems. Plenty of gang violence. Plenty of non-gang violence. Plenty of weapons, and there's a general atmosphere of violence and adrenaline that permeates the air. So you always have to be alert. And
Yes.
and then there also they had a system of maintaining order in prison known as keep lock. That if you were found guilty of breaking a prison rule, they would keep you in the cell 23 hours a day out of 24. You could take 2 showers one week and 3 the next instead of showering every day. You could not use the phone while you were on that status. They'd put you in a small caged area by yourself with maybe a pull-up bar if you're lucky. That constituted recreation while you were on that status, and you could not purchase grocery items.
Right.
There were several times in the course of my incarceration where I was assaulted. One time I nearly lost my life, and because I did the best that I could in defending myself, often losing, by the way, just to clarify that, but not always. Once in a while I pulled off the upset and I came up with a victory here and there, but not often. But my point is that I was subjected to those sanctions, because in prison, if you're defending yourself, then obviously that means that you were fighting.
Right.
But beyond physical, it was also an emotional and a psychological battle as well. So I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up, suicidal ideation. So all of those things I had to keep fighting off. I did lose 7 appeals. When your appeals are over, you don't give you a lawyer anymore, and you're permanently locked out of the court unless you can find new evidence. And so I went on a letter writing campaign for about 4 years looking for someone who would take my case pro bono and hope that they could find some new evidence, which would be enough to get me back into court. So I did that for 4 years, and then I went to the parole board, where because, in large part, because I maintained my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility, I got denied parole with the parole board, referencing also nature of the crime and why they denied me parole. So ultimately, I did do 16. I ultimately did do 16 years, and I was exonerated through further DNA testing. So one of the letters I wrote to a book author and care of the publishing company was instead forwarded to an investigator, and she believed in my innocence based on the DNA, and she suggested I write the Innocence Project to take my case. She lobbied them to take it. She got other respected legal entities to do that. I got lucky that one of the workers in there, who was not an attorney, represented my case several times, and she got them to take it. So that was the first most significant factor. Second thing is the district attorney, Janine Pirro, who took office just before my first appeal was decided. She left office, and so she was out of the way,
Yeah.
and then we got lucky that the actual criminal's DNA was in a data bank. So, and it was there because left free while I was doing time for his crime, he killed a second victim, who
Oh,
was a school teacher and had two children. So, on September 22nd, my conviction was overturned. I was released. I went back to court on November 2nd, 2006. At which point, all the charges were dismissed on actual innocence grounds.
oh wow, that's amazing. So yeah, you reached out to the Innocence Project, and they uh, came and you found just found that one advocate that would keep digging for you when you couldn't, and then you were found innocent, and then you came out because of your experience, with those fights as tough as nails, and you went to law school, and now you are an attorney, and you're doing the same thing that the Innocence Project is, and you're finding people that were wrongly convicted and helping them regain their freedom again. So tell us about that.
Sure. So I was an individual advocate for about 5 years, uh, and I did a lot of speaking engagements, and I was trading privacy for awareness by doing media interviews. Became a weekly columnist. So, and I was meeting regularly with elected officials. So I did that for 5 years, during which time it was very difficult because I was released with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It took 5 years to get any compensation, and I had to deal with the psychological after effects of my experience, and the stigma of having been in prison, albeit wrongfully, and technology passing me by. The internet, GPS, cell phones hadn't been
Mm-hmm.
created. Culture was different. Cities and towns looked different. Different people I knew in those areas moved out, so it felt like I was kind of like in a parallel world. It was particularly hard because I had never before lived on my own, so I had to get driver's license. I had to go shopping. I had to balance a budget and write checks. So all of those things were new, were difficult for. I mean, it was kind of lonely as well. So it was 5 years of difficulty. Got a scholarship from Mercy College, totally unsolicited. I used that to finish the bachelor's degree. I was 10 classes short of the bachelor's at the time. The funding was cut for college education for prisoners while I was inside.
Yeah.
Uh, got the master's degree with a thesis written on wrongful conviction cause and reform. And I did get compensated. I used some of it to start the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice because I couldn't forget about the men and women I had metaphorically left behind. So we put to continue with the policy work, and we started getting people out who were wrongfully imprisoned. But at some point, it was not enough for me to simply sit in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to be able to represent some of the clients and make some of the arguments. So I made the foray into law school in pursuit of my dream of exonerating others as an attorney. So my dream now is I'd love to be able. We have 10 active cases now. That's aside
All
from the
right.
10 people we've got home, and we are pushing policy changes in New York, Pennsylvania, and California. We are part of a bigger coalition called "It Could Happen to You," which I'm an advisory board member of, and also sit on the Restorative Justice International Global Advisory Board, which restorative justice has application to wrongful conviction as well, trying to restore people back to the position they were in to the best that you can, at least from a healing point of view. But one important thing is I do make sense of everything in a kaleidoscopic type of way. I do believe my purpose in the world is to fight wrongful conviction, prevent what happened to me from happening to others, free the people that it already has, and also making inroads on broader justice reform. And so it makes sense to me what happened to me. I understand it in that way. It's healing. It's cathartic.
Yeah.
I do have my purpose in the world. I do feel like I'm doing God's will, and I'm trying to live my life in a way that's pleasing to Him. So I have that inner peace. And, and
Right.
and speaking of that, one of the key ways, probably the most important way that I was able to survive my time in prison, and there were many factors, but the biggest factor for sure ultimately. And it was definitely belief in God.
Right.
That kept me going without a doubt. And other things along the way, maybe as part of that or in addition to that, uh, I didn't. I thought I lived from appeal to appeal, so I didn't think I was doing all that time. I thought I was just doing a year or two.
Mm.
The next appeal would be decided, which I was sure I was going to win because I was innocent.
Yeah.
Studied the law. That gave a sense of comfort. I used to read articles about other people who were exonerated, and that inspired me to keep going. From 1998 forward, I read 3 or 4 nonfiction books a week. So that helped also. I did some other defense mechanisms, so we can laugh a little bit, dark humor. So when I would play basketball or ping pong or chess, I had this elaborate delusion that I was a professional player and so was everyone
Uh-huh.
else. And because but it was not really like kids playing on a playground. This was more like I had to get out of the prison for a couple of hours mentally. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a defense mechanism. And similarly, I mean, I listened to sports talk radio, but it wasn't listening to sports talk radio. It was like a lifeline
Uh-huh.
to the outside.
Right.
Would cut out nature pictures and hang them up and kind of travel there mentally as well. And even when they allowed us to purchase a television, I mean, it stayed off for the most part because I was writing letters and trying to get out and studying law and reading books. But when I did turn it on to see certain weekly programs, I would like pretend like, well, I'm visiting friends, like these characters in the,
Mhm.
each week. So there were all those things that I did in order to try to survive being wrongfully imprisoned. There was another wrongfully convicted prisoner there, Frank Sterling, who we kept each other going morale
Right.
wise. Every 6 weeks, we would get up, we would meet up, and we keep each other going morale wise, and we would brainstorm about the next move to make.
Right.
And he was exonerated a couple of years after me,
Mhm.
just so it wasn't simply that he was claiming to
Right.
be innocent. He actually
Right.
was. He did 18
Yeah.
years. And lastly, again, you mentioned when I was in prison, you visited me. You
Mhm.
mentioned that biblical verse. And
Yeah.
so there was actually, I placed an ad in a paper called the Sacramento Bee. I'm in New York, and
Uh-huh.
Sacramento is in California. And there was a crime victim actually that saw the ad and responded, and he became my pen pal.
Uh-huh.
For the last year or two, helping me continue on. And I was openly asking him, "Look, do you think I should just quit? Should I just give up? Should I just commit
Mhm.
suicide? I'm never getting out of here." And imagine saying that to a stranger, by the way, or even just to anyone, but particularly a stranger. I mean, I was
Right.
really at the end of my rope,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, but all those things. But how I survived. But I really feel as I look back across my life and, being the that person I am now and the advocate I am now. And by the way, I'm grateful to be home. I'm grateful to be
Oh, yeah.
free. I know there's many people not as fortunate that are still wrongfully in prison
Right.
now. Some people who will never ever be exonerated, others who still have significant amounts of time to do prior to being exonerated, and other forms of injustice. I mean, people being over sentenced as well. And but when I think about all of that, and that's also a key thing is my head is the right size and my
Mhm.
feet stay firmly planted. I'm just a tool in the struggle.
Right.
If I could have passed the cup from me
Yeah.
to someone else, I would have done that because the
Mhm.
spirit being willing, flesh being weak.
Right.
I
Yeah.
would, but that I can't. So all I can do is just be the best that I am that I'm able to do now. But I do appreciate the small things. I like feeling fresh air.
Yeah.
I like the sunlight.
Yeah.
I like the freedom of movement. I like being able to try new food or have a new activity or try a new experience. Those small things in life that many people, including myself, take for granted.
Right.
But mean so much.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go here, Jeff, I have one of the things I got to say is I know it was 16 years, but when you yourself are kind of the spearhead behind getting someone else uh, released that's in there innocently, you got to think back and think, man, they might still be in prison if I didn't serve my
That's
time
right.
in there, and
Amen.
that's got
Yes.
to be mind blowing in itself,
It,
you
it
know.
is. It is. That's the best feeling in the world, doing
Yeah.
that and helping to pass a law to prevent people from going in,
Right.
for sure.
I want to ask you this. You know, there's tensions, with the police and with people. It's hot and cold at times, and 2020 has been crazy, and you know, there's different things. If someone finds their self um in your shoes like you were when you were 16, I know you want to be, compliant and courteous with police officers, but what's one thing or two things that they should keep in mind, you know, um, as far as like their rights, that they should do maybe to alleviate the situation and not get caught like you did.
Yeah, for sure. So, you give your name and where your address, and the next thing is you want a lawyer.
Mhm.
Insist that they give you a lawyer that'll level the playing field. That'll prevent them from manipulating you or taking advantage of you in the way that happened to me. Innocence of people often works against them. So they think, well, if I didn't do nothing and I don't know anything, uh, why shouldn't I talk to the police? What could possibly happen? But quite a bit. Similarly, if the police want to search your vehicle, you should not agree to let them search it. You should make that clear in a respectful way, but still, look,
Mhm.
officer, I am not consenting to the search. So if you decide to search my vehicle, you're doing so against my will. Give them plenty of space. Let them do it if they're going to do it. You can take it up in court later, but don't agree. There's been people that have agreed to let police officers search their vehicle, and the next thing you know, something is found in the vehicle that actually really wasn't there. That having been said, I do want to share that, as you correctly point out, there are very good people in law
Mhm.
enforcement and
Yes.
in prosecutor positions as well. I don't. It's definitely not a few bad apples. All right, so I reject that rhetoric. It
Mhm.
wouldn't be so many injustices if that was the case. But still, there's good people and bad people in that profession. I do co-teach the morals and ethics class at the Bergen County Police Academy to new police cadets twice a year. I've done that for 7 years, and I've spoken in front of groups of prosecutors and judges as well, and other and forensic scientists. So I do consider the work that I do about justice and accuracy, not anti-cop or anti-prosecutor, but definitely against cops and prosecutors that break rules and don't
Yes.
don't follow correct procedures and run over constitutional rights. So I do mention that, and I do encourage people in terms of justice reform, to never let the tactics that you utilize devolve into vandalism, violence, destroying property, because when you do that, you're hurting the movement. You're taking the focus away from the legitimate issues that you're talking about,
Mhm.
and it's instead about what you're doing there. And so that's not a helpful thing to do. So I do encourage that. I am in favor of police reform. I do think that they need more training with respect to dealing with people in mental health situation. At the same time, I personally, I don't support the whole defund the police movement. If I call 911, that means I have an emergency.
Yeah.
I'd like to not be put on hold. I really would like a armed police officer to respond to the emergency. So I don't think that that's the answer either. I think that that's a little bit too extreme.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, let everybody know where they can find you and find your foundation. And I encourage each and every one of you, if Jeff's story has touched a chord with you, if it's something you're passionate about, to get involved. That's the point of Christmas Clatter Cares, is to turn you on to uh, different nonprofits that could use your support. And
Sure. So I'm sorry.
go
Go,
ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, so my website's www.deskovic.org. That's Deskovic. My dream is to have a chapter in each state and ultimately each country. I see wrongful conviction as a worldwide problem. Places where you don't hear about wrongful conviction, it's not because it's not happening. It's that few people are working on exonerating anybody. So we do have a Patreon page. My dream: what if there was 25,000 people that were willing to sacrifice $3 to $5 a month on a recurring monthly basis? That we'd be able to free additional innocent people, expand our policy work. Amazon has the Amazon Smile program. You could register Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation as a charity of choice, and Amazon will donate a small percentage of your purchase without it increasing your cost.
Okay,
If
cool.
you are, yeah, and maybe last point I'll quickly make is if you are formerly incarcerated or your friends and family, I do co-own the Recharge Beyond the Bars reentry game, and it facilitates formerly incarcerated people with reconnecting with their friends and family through icebreaker questions. If you've enjoyed the interview today, you can certainly see the documentary short that's out on Amazon.
All right. And for those listening in their car or walking, all those links will be in the show notes and here in the description on YouTube. Just have to look down below the video. That way you are just a click away. And Jeff, thanks so much for joining me here on Christmas Clatter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. And I hope that this story of overcoming adversity and reaching back and making a difference can generate some Christmas cheer. And listen, what I did, surviving and reaching back and helping other people is let me give a gift here early. Okay. More important than anything physical. So, whatever situation you find yourself in, wrongfully imprisoned, survivor of domestic abuse, homeless, sexual assault victim, recoverer of debilitating illness, never give up, right? Have a plan. Make sure the plan's realistic. Be flexible to vary the plan. If the circumstances dictate, don't be afraid of hard work and never give up. And when you get through on the other side, reach back to other people in that same position that you were in and do some work on the preventative side, and you can make the world a better place, and it'll be healing and cathartic for you. And so with that, I'll say Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Yes. Merry Christmas, Jeff. And like I like to say here on Christmas Clatter, and Jeff's involved in doing this each and every day through his work. Remember, keep Christmas hope alive every
Amen.
day.
Every day.